Lotus. Lotus is a beautiful game by Renegade Games. It is beautiful in the sense that the components are attractive. There is very nice art on them. So when you look at them individually, like, oh, this is beautiful. But it's also a beautiful game in the sense that gameplay almost works as an aesthetic principle, almost as a compositional principle. That is, as you're pursuing your objectives, your in-game objectives, trying to win the game, the components will create compositions on the table that are very aesthetically pleasing, at least to my eye. In this game, you're creating flowers. How poetic is that? Each player has a deck of cards of this type. Each card represents a petal, and there's a number up here indicating the number of petals of that type that it takes to complete the type of flower that the petal belongs to. Also, you see icons there. There may be an icon or two icons, and the more icons you have on a flower, the better your presence is there. When it is your turn, you can take two actions. An action is to play up to 2 cards on a single flower. So for a single action, I can play up to 2 cards, but they have to belong to the same type. If there isn't a flower of that type on the table yet, then I can start a new one. You see these lines here help us organize the cards by telling us the angle at which they should be played relative to one another. So there is a flower that hasn't been started yet. I'm gonna start it with the cards that I play. Don't they already look really nice? I mean, it's just beautiful. So for an action, you can play up to 2 cards on a single flower, starting a new one if there isn't one yet, or adding to an existing flower. For 2 actions, I can also exchange petal cards from my hand. That is, I take 2 cards from my hand, up to 2 cards, and I put them at the bottom of my deck, and I draw an equal number of cards from my personal deck. Or I can also move a guardian. Each player has 2 nice wooden pieces representing guardians. It's so much more poetic than if you call them insects, but they are insects, and I like them. I like my little caterpillars here. You can move a guardian from your personal supply to any one flower, or if you already have one on a flower, you can move it to another flower. So maybe things will look like this. Another thing that is important, of course, is to collect flowers. Players are playing petals to complete flowers. When a flower is complete, for example, it takes 4 petals to complete that flower. First, you check the majority. That is, the player that has the most influence on that flower. Each icon that you have in there, each icon from there counts as a point. Each guardian counts as 1. So here, red player has 3 icons, 1, 2, and 3, and your green player has 1, 2, 3, 4. So control majority goes to green player. The green player gets a benefit, which can be a 5-point token. These points will be scored at the end of the game, or it can be one of those tokens. They don't give you points, but those tokens represent advantages that you can then use for the rest of the game. They're in different colors, depending, so they can be given to players based on the color that they are playing. An advantage is that your hand size increases by 1. Regular size is 4 cards, and they can become 5 if you gain this advantage, if you choose that advantage. Infinite growth, you can play 3 or more petal cards during your turn, which is really neat. Allows you to do sort of like a blitzkrieg flower attack by boom, putting down a lot of cards and maybe completing a flower that the opponent didn't think you would complete. And then you will have the Elder Guardian. That is, you get an extra guardian of your type, and it counts as 2 because it's silver, so that means it's badass. This is the game. Well, actually, no, there's another important thing. Oopsie, which is pretty major. After you have given the advantage to the player that has majority, then all the petals forming the flower that was just completed go to the scoring pile of the player that completed the flower. So sometimes a player will get majority and the other player will get the cards. And with big cards, with big flowers such as this one, that is a lot of points. At the end of your turn, after you played your cards, you draw new cards from your deck and or from this other deck here. which has the same type of petals, but they are wildflowers, so they do not have those icons, so they do not advance your position in the game or on a flower in terms of majority, but maybe you simply want to complete a flower because you want to get all the cards, or you already have majority and you think that doesn't matter, but you simply want to complete that flower before the opponent upsets the balance on that flower, then wild cards could be a good solution. So you continue like this, and the end of the game is triggered by the player that draws the last card in their deck. At that point, everybody takes a turn, including that player. Then the game is over, and you assign the remaining flowers that are still on the table at that point, simply based on majority. And then you finally count points that are based on the tokens the players have collected during the game, the scoring tokens, and the cards that are in their decks that are scored at the end. So, Lotus, this is how it works. Play your cards, create these beautiful flowers, and try to score as many points as possible by timing things. It is really a game about timing, about reading the opponents. You want to complete a flower, but also you don't want to leave a flower out there that is almost complete, and that the opponent may complete and score a lot of points by grabbing the flower. Unless, of course, there is a situation where, well, you really want to be the one with a majority. Then you have a flower that is almost complete, you have majority, maybe it's not that big, so you won't lose too many points if the opponent grabs it, and you still get some advantages, and you may want to leave the flower open there for someone else to complete it. But in general, the idea is about hedging your bets until you're at a point where you can complete a flower in a single move, bringing it from not very complete to fully complete without giving opportunities to the others. As I said, this is a game with a very intense aesthetic element. It just looks gorgeous, it just looks beautiful. And you do not have to think aesthetically for the aesthetic element to manifest itself. You do not have to think, oh, I'm going to play this card, although it really doesn't help me, but then it will look so pretty. Because if you're thinking in that terms, you're doing crafts, you're doing other types of very wide activities. But to me is an added value when I have a game that I'm playing as a game, thinking a game mentality, and what happens in front of me, what takes shape in front of me is something beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. Lotus has to me this almost magical combination between a very solid gameplay, which I find entertaining, and also an astoundingly beautiful aesthetic. Flowers also something beautiful, and something beautiful and not thematically, I should say, associated with the game hobby. It's not about with the hobby, with the with the nerd culture. It's not about fantasy, sci-fi, monsters, dragons. It's something that you can show to people that do not usually play board games. You may convince people to play this game with you, although maybe they would be skeptical if you take out a game where it is about slaying trolls and storming the walls of a castle. For example, very often there are now those who go camping, and I like to bring games that are not too big and that I can play with some of our friends that do not usually play games. And this is a game that, as you start setting it up, people would say, oh, wait a second, what is that? And people will want to play because it looks great. But again, it's not the trap that the game looks great and then it is a bad game mechanically. It's a solid game with very nice components and nice gameplay, entertaining gameplay. True, when the opponents are taking their turn, you do not have much to do, but you are paying attention to the ever-changing balance of power, of control, of influence on the flowers, because you want to make sure that when the game comes back to you, you know more or less what you want to do. Again, everybody that goes before you changes things slightly, but you will want to pay attention. So there's that element that keeps you engaged with the design. On the other hand, if you're playing with games with players that do not have that mentality, they just want to think about their own stuff, as other players are taking the turn, and then the game comes back to them and they are taking a look at the board for the first time, then of course they will generate downtime. It is not a design that does have to have downtime. Other designs almost have it, like it's almost unavoidable when players have a lot to think. Here, the thinking that you have to do in your turn is not much, but it is enough to keep you entertained as long as you have paid attention to what was going on. So it needs to be played by players that may not be strong gamers, experienced gamers, but they want to be engaged with the design at some level. Lotus, in general, it's a beautiful game with very engaging gameplay. A game by Renegade Games, and one that I definitely recommend.